Now, if you look at the apparent bullseye right in the center there, that's definitely 3 to 4 degrees Celsius down. That means crops don't grow there. And then what you would do is do the September, do the October, go back June, July, August, September, and do the same thing I did with Uruguay, just overlay it and do it with Paraguay, and overlay that with the crop maps and then see what grows there and then subtract that out as a global total. And welcome back for the second segment, Mini Ice Age Conversations, right here on Brighteon TV Uncensored. I'm your host, David Dubine. Before the break, looking at that watts per meter squared reduction and how much it will affect crop production. But let's review, what is a year without a summer? I keep referencing this year without a summer, and then I'll give some very clean timelines on how this is going to unfold, how quickly it will affect your life. And then how long it's going to take to recover back to some sort of normalcy, quote unquote, if there is any. The return to normal. It's going to take a little while for the sun to return to normal. It'll take a little bit for our cloud cells and jet streams to return to normal. But between then and now, it's going to be a little bit crazy. Let's look over here. In May 1816, this is the year without a summer. This is a rendition of a painting right here of cloudy skies, kind of weird colored skies. The frosts were so intense that it killed off crops in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York. And I said, were they really in the summer? Snow was recorded falling on June 6th, 1816 in Albany, New York, also Maine. Okay, that's northeast U.S. I'm looking at the map backwards there. So we're looking at the Pinatubo eruption here. The blue is the Southern Hemisphere, the black is the Northern Hemisphere. So the time of the eruption is right there and it's demarcated with the lines and the color change. It took a full 1 year for the cooling to take place. Now the Mount Pinatubo fingerprint also took exactly about a year before it hit the maximum cooling. Now once it does, it's going to run along there for approximately a full year, maybe a little longer, before the ash starts to come out of the atmosphere and then, temperatures trend back up and then crop production increases again. We're still 2 months away from the bottom of the cooling, if you will. And then we have a full year plus of that. So you're looking at about a year and a half of extreme duress and non-crop planting, losses everywhere. And somewhere in that time point, governments are going to be aware, you're all going to be aware, everybody on the planet is going to be aware. And that point, then you're going to get your digital rationing cards, and that is going to be the way they're going to force you to do things you would never otherwise do. You think it unthinkable now, how it was in COVID, like, oh, never put on, yeah, okay, everybody. Wait until you get food ration cards, and if you don't do this, that, or the other, they won't feed your family. Then what? November reminds us to be thankful and focused on boosting our radiant health before winter. I use a potent remedy that's improved the quality of my life and deepened my sleep as well. I take C60 EVO olive oil almost every morning, have a lot more energy and mental focus all day long. Working around the farm is easier and I have a lot more endurance. Remember, health is our greatest wealth, and pure C60 ESS60 really works. ESS60 is a breakthrough technology delivering the carbon-60 miracle molecule for humans and pets. Don't forget your furry friends, and check out the C60 EVO holiday gift collections for everyone on your list. C60 EVO's lab has an impressive track record of 31 years and my personal recommendation. You deserve the best remedies on earth, and so do the ones you love. Buy direct from the lab and upgrade your life today. Take 10% off your first order by going to c60evo.com/adapt2030 or click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video. So just an early warning, it is here and it's coming. They have unleashed the Kraken by putting this out publicly now that we're coming into shrouding, global shrouding in the ash layering. So let's just put crop production in Southern Hemisphere into its own box right now. Argentina, I want to stay in South America. They had the lowest crop for some umpteen years, and it went from 23 million tons last year. Their wheat crop dropped down to 13.7 million tons. That's 10 million tons off. See, we're already getting into the crop losses here. You get this. That's a major loss. That's incredible. But that is going to be the profile for every single country in the Southern Hemisphere marching forward. It's just there's a lot of good data right now. They're coming into the harvest season. They're trying to sell it on. Brazil's having a little bit of problem trying to get wheat from Argentina. There's not enough. Argentina can barely grow enough to even support itself. So all the export markets that Argentina had supplied earlier are totally at a zero. So Brazil being next door, you know, they have a border. They share a land border. Brazil's out looking for 1.5 million tons of wheat that they could not acquire from Argentina. So now every normal buyer that Argentina just said no to is out on the world market looking for wheat. And Brazil's out on the world market looking for 1.5 million tons of wheat. And China's out there looking too. Ukraine's offline. Europe is borderline offline. They lost 30% of their crops this year. The tallies are still inbound. I would imagine that would creep up towards 35, 37% myself, but we'll stay with the 30%. Where's the wheat going to come from? If neighboring countries are having this much difficulty already, and we're not even in the major cooling yet, and we really haven't come into the planting season as such in the Southern Hemisphere, because it's so cold they can't plant the crops right now. They're a month and a half, month behind on the planting in the Southern Hemisphere. And here's another thing. Now we get into the shenanigans. Brazil said, well, we know the soy crop is going to be really lean because of the third La Nina in a row in this coming off in the Pacific Ocean. They know this drought is going to continue all the way through April, March or April of next year. In addition to the total solar irradiance declines and sunlight striking the leaf surface in a field. So Brazil decides they're just going to hoard it. They're not going to sell it until the prices go up. They're a major supplier to the world. So what happens when a major supplier to the world goes, no, we're going to keep it until you pay more? This is just the first of many. This is the world we're entering with food as a weapon. And by the way, since we're coming in and talking about foods, they changed the GMO labeling to biofortified. So keep that on your list. When you're looking at labels, they've changed, just look for the wording biofortified, and that is the new moniker for GMO. Again, they're going to play this cat and mouse game. Once a majority of the populace learns the words, they're going to change the words again until it takes the populace to catch up, and then, where does it go next on that? So taking you down into Australia, they're going into summer. And the Melbourne Cup was the coldest since 1913, which is 100 and what? 10 years? Or 9. We're not quite in 23 yet. So 109 years, the coldest Melbourne Cup, going into summer. So there's all these fingerprints all over the Southern Hemisphere showing there's real anomalies happening all over the place. They're going to get cooler as well. So this is the data I've been working on right now. And I'm getting out all my spreadsheets with all the countries and all the maps and all the crop data and sandwiching this into an algorithm and then putting height and altitudes and which crops are grown where, and we can get percentages of where it's lost based on these maps and come out with a better total probably than the USDA can by the end of next month. So what you're looking at on the top left is from November 1st, 2021, which was pre-eruption, 2 months of before the eruption. And then we got January 1st, 2022, we come in, and then boom, the eruption January 15th. And that top left map takes into pre-eruption, post-eruption, all the temperature data, and this is the anomaly, like how much different is it from the normal on the 30-year average. So, it's looking pretty normal there. But then, well, what do we have on the bottom right? This is August to October, just 3 months post-eruption. And look how much cooling has occurred when we're looking at pre-eruption, post-eruption data. And I thought, okay, well, that West Australia is a pretty interesting nugget to look at. So let's widen that out a bit. If we only look at October of 2022, which is just last month, look at the temperature changes. That aqua is going down into 3 degrees Celsius anomaly below the normal temperatures. Pre and post eruption, top left, only October bottom. That is very different. And remember, Southern Hemisphere is going into the summer. So for them to have this type of cooling way below normal going into summer on average temperatures, what's going to happen when they go into the winter is the question coming into next year. Will we see a 6 or 7? Will they had to have a 7 or 8 degrees Celsius because it's so far out? Are we going to see different colorings at 7 and 8 C below? And you can go through the different states in Australia and then dissect this information, get a lot more granular, which I do. So the same thing, we're looking at pre and post eruption here, the left side. It's just more zoomed in. And what do we see in West Australia just the month of October? That is a startling difference. Crops being, well, they're coming into the harvest season for the wheat, because remember they had planted prior to. So now as the cooling's really starting to take hold, they're finally got their wheat harvested. But they're planting an enormous amount of other crops, barley, sorghum, millet, any types of field crops that, everything from tomatoes and all the veggies in between, oats. So they're coming into that planting season right now. So we should see a lot more data come out as the delayed planting, frozen crops. And in New South Wales, they have lost almost 100% of their wheat crop due to once in a 1,000-year rains, like 3 storms in a row. There's so much rain coming down that the heads of wheat are starting to sprout out green because there's so much moisture on the wheat that normally you do microgreens and trays or wheatgrass. Well, it's actually doing that on the head of wheat while it stands in the field. It's just growing out. So it's a non-salvageable because they can't get the machines in there anyway to till it up or harvest or anything. Now, if we look at Victoria, we see the same profile again. Left side is pre and post-eruption combined temperature set from November 1st to October 31st, 2022. So we see the data set there. It's yellow is like 1 degree Celsius above. That sort of skin tone is neutral, if you will. But look how it's switching already on the right side of just the October 2022 temperatures. You've gone from 1 degree Celsius over, dripping down into 1 degree Celsius below the averages. So that's a 2 degrees Celsius switch. Now these are just temperatures. Now keep in mind, that solar irradiance coming down to allow crop growth is something quite different. So Uruguay, in June of 2022, shows this profile on the left here. Extreme cooling. You're looking at 3 degrees Celsius under the normal on the 30-year average. And then on the right side, this is June, if we're looking down through Argentina. You start to see a few cool spots in the more northerly latitudes, and then Uruguay connected to that. So these two are, again, border countries. They share a land border. Uruguay. So let's take a look into Uruguay and see if you're going to try to ping where the crop losses would be in Uruguay. Let's look at the maps. Now, anybody can do this. It's in Spanish, obviously. So marzo is March, abril, April, Mayo, May, and they've got junio, which is June, and then julio is July, and then agosto, August. And we got the September on the far right, which is the larger, and then we got the October data set. So just generally looking through these maps, where do you think the crops would be lost if the temperature is declining and the solar irradiance is declining? Where would you ping on this map that you think there would be crop losses? Moving through. Well, I think in that northwest quadrant. And then if you look up there, they're growing rice. Oh, okay. And then this is where you need to start to crunch the data. All right, how much rice do they produce only in that section of the country, taken as a global total percentage? Is it 1% of global total? And then you need to subtract that. Okay, now go to Paraguay, do it again. Now go to Argentina, do it again. Go to Venezuela, do it again. Go to Brazil. Now you're really starting to crunch the numbers based on these temperature deltas here. and what crops are being grown there. Then you're going to have to overlay crop growing zone, like crop maps on top of this. But first, it all starts with finding where your anomalies are so you can see where the crops are going to be lost, and then you overlay what crops are being grown in those zones. So again, post-eruption and pre-eruption. So on the bottom is pre-eruption, nothing happened. And this was September and October of 2021, way before Tonga happened. Look at the temperature profiles. A little bit up, a little bit neutral, but then we look at the two top months here, September of 2022 and October of 2022. Again, we're starting to see this rotation, this flip into the cooling, way anomalous. So pre and post data is where you need to start connecting and collecting points that are seen across different maps. And going into all these weather bureaus, some of the information is really easy to find. Like they put it right front and center. Here's your anomaly maps, click on it. Like the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia, it took me like 45 minutes to finally find their maps that I showed you prior. But that should not be like that. I'm a researcher and I go through this stuff every day. What about my mom and dad who never been in there looking for that kind of data? They're never ever going to find it. So some of us much more buried than others. So Uruguay, thank you very much. It's right on the front. Uruguay did a great job by putting up the real data. So easy for anybody to find it. A fifth grader could click on it and get that. So speaking of Paraguay, coldest November day ever recorded in Paraguay, ever. Going back some 130 years. Okay. It matches. Let me see, where would Paraguay be? Oh, right there. I got a temperature map for you from September of 2022, Paraguay anomalies. Now, if you look at the apparent bullseye right in the center there, that's definitely 3 to 4 degrees Celsius down. That means crops don't grow there. And then what you would do is do the September, do the October, go back June, July, August, September, and do the same thing I did with Uruguay, just overlay it and do it with Paraguay, and overlay that with the crop maps and then see what grows there and then subtract that out as a global total. It takes some time to do this research. We're going through 53 countries right now. I have an assistant help me. 53 countries with just what I'm doing. Every single temperature map for the last year and then overlaying all of it with the crop data, and then we're going to put in altitude as well. So the GIS software, the altitudes are probably going to give a lot more clarity of where the write-offs are going to be more easily than just looking straight at temperature and where it's grown there. We got altitude to deal with too. That's what they talked about, the year without a summer, New Hampshire, etc. When you look at the altitude up there in the northeast US, then you start to map that out across the planet. You get some overlays. GIS does an altitude layer on that, which I'm trying to get into. Now here's something off Fertilizer Daily, which should also, shake you a little bit. The person's, excuse me if I mispronounce your name, Vladislava Magaletska, agriculture minister of the Ukraine, comes out and says, there will be no winter wheat. And probably in the summer, they'll only offer sunflower and some niche crops, not corn. I said, blow away back in my chair here. What? No winter wheat and no corn coming from Ukraine next year. They already told you. So that's going to be an X and an X, which would usually be a huge, huge amount of food going outbound. And then you start to look at these African nations that are already under extreme duress because they can't get their regular export supplies from places like Brazil and Argentina and the Ukraine. Where are these nations going to get their food from if major producing nations are struggling to feed themselves? This is where the civil wars are going to start first. This is where the most civil unrest and street protests over food will be focused. So if you follow the news, focus on Democratic Republic Congo, Ghana, which I think should be more red on this map because they moved over to this thing like Sri Lanka, which is 100% renewables and organics, and they went over to the power supply, which is unreliable, and their economy is crashing. Europe 2.0, and Nigeria for sure. Ethiopia as well. But I want to throw a little bit of the human element in here. Latvia. They are sawing the park benches to take away as wood to heat their homes right now. So if we don't have enough natural gas to heat homes and they're stealing park benches, Where's the natural gas going to come to produce our fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides? It's simply not. Europe is under liquidation at the moment. It's under bankruptcy proceedings, being liquidated lock, stock, and barrel. BASF has shut their operations. Chemicals are no longer forthcoming from Europe. They're moving to China. How long will that take? Unknown. Steel smelter still closed. Aluminum smelters closed. Everything in base metals closed. Winter forecast for the last couple minutes here. Thank you for staying with me and your valuable time. Appreciate you sharing ideas with me here. The polar circulation in the northern hemisphere is tweaked, to say the least. Now, the way they had measured this before prior, the more snowfall there was in the Kamchatka Peninsula, the more that would spin the polar vortex and make it kind of wobble in an oval and not really just column-esque that you would normally get. So this was back 2015. They had a very similar event. There was a lot of snow on Kamchatka, not nearly as much as this year, though, by the way. A huge amount of snow on Kamchatka Peninsula early in the season, but this year is, double the amount. But I circled it in black. This is what happens. You get this spill out for some reason, like the inverse, where the snow is on the other side. Inverse comes out, and you get these tongues and ripples coming right out of the polar vortex. And it's going to be a prolonged winter for sure. And lo and behold, this is what's inbound right now as we speak. And that matches so perfectly that same shape of the spill out of that tongue. Look at that. I circled it in black. The cavitation is causing this spill out. Okay, well, what does that mean for you and me? Be extremely careful during this period, because these temperatures here, looking at 9 degrees Fahrenheit, coming up next week, and this will run us through the 12th, in just a couple of days through the next week. This is going to be a brutal freeze event here. This is an Arctic plunge. Look at these. Below zero, 3 degrees below zero already, and not even Thanksgiving. This whole area that we see, anything that's crops that have come out in a grass form or shoots or seedlings, going to be totally frozen. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen with the winter wheat crop that was planted, that's emerged, and then it's going to hit 0 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. They're going to have to, it's going to be a loss. And this is the scary thing, understanding what's going on everywhere on the planet, and we're about to get frozen out and lose part of our crops here. And the Mississippi River is not functioning. We can't even get our inputs into here. The hypocrisy of it all, too. Private jet parking to the left. Oh, crisis, climate crisis meeting discussions to the right. Did you see the air map that, you can see where jets are moving around? That was so chock-a-block, it was just one sea of yellow flying in to Egypt for this event. Really, how is it that those with private jets, millionaires, billionaires, are now yapping like you have to eat bugs and we're going to control the reset and we're going to tell you where the food's going to be grown and we're going to tell you what kind of food you can go and we're going to tell you what kind of digital rationing card. We'll tell you what to believe and we're going to scatter the energy of the planet so nobody can come together. This interference wave, I do believe in frequency and vibration. It could be harnessed so we can ascend, or it can be used like you would put your finger in a light socket or put a fork in a light socket. You're going to get shocked. That's the whole purpose of all these shock and awe articles that we're seeing in the disillusion and the dissolving of our world that makes no sense. It's insane asylum world that we're living in. But that interference wave needs to be out there to deflect from the crop losses I've just shown you. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.